This is Software Engineering Radio, the podcast for professional developers on the web at se-radio.net. SE Radio is brought to you by the IEEE Computer Society and by IEEE Software Magazine. Online at computer.org/software. DigitalOcean is the easiest cloud platform to deploy, manage, and scale applications of any size, removing infrastructure friction and providing predictability so developers and their teams can deploy faster and focus on building software that customers love. With thousands of in-depth tutorials and an active community, we provide the support you need. DigitalOcean stands out of the crowd due to its simplicity and high performance with no billing surprises. Try DigitalOcean for free by getting a $100 infrastructure credit at do.co/SERadio.
Hello and welcome to Software Engineering Radio. This is Travis Kimmel, and today I have Lara Hogan and Deepa Subramaniam joining me on the show. Previously, Deepa led product and design at Kickstarter, Hillary for America, Charity Water, and Adobe, and Lara was the VP of Engineering at Kickstarter and Engineering Director at Etsy. The two have since partnered to co-found Wherewithal, where they help other leaders build, mentor, and grow their product and engineering organizations. Deepa and Lara, thank you for joining me on Software Engineering Radio.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. We're happy to be here.
Yeah. Fun stuff to talk about today. We'll be talking about revitalizing cross-functional product, engineering, and design organizations of any size. And specifically, we're going to cover a number of different levers that leaders can pull that will ultimately help their teams ship higher quality software faster. So first, let's start with a little clarification. When we talk about helping organizations reach their potential, what does that really mean?
Yeah, so we work with a variety of different organizations. They can be any team that has some sort of product or engineering component. So it can be small seed startups, growth stage startups, larger companies, nonprofits, all anything that sort of encompasses anything with product and engineering. And what we really love to do is to partner with leaders, emerging leaders, individuals on teams to make sure that these product and engineering organizations know how to create and execute their vision, how to grow and nurture leaders, and essentially build teams that can collaborate and coordinate in this weird, delicate little dance that is product development. So we love partnering closely with leaders to help coach them and help them make sure that they understand exactly what they need to do to build foundational skills and lead their team successfully and confidently. We do a lot of things around auditing product-driven development processes, making sure that we do workshops and roundtables and trainings to help cross-functional teams like product and design and engineering teams know exactly what they have to do between setting a strategy, creating a roadmap, and executing on that roadmap. So both Lara and I just really love how much energy it takes to collaborate and coordinate in a really healthy and impactful fashion. And we want to bring those learnings into product and engineering organizations that we work with.
It's so much fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And what's the composition of a typical team that you might engage with?
Ooh, good question. It's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, generally there's, going to be some engineering leadership involved, bring us in to help sort of look at their engineering team, make sure that they can scale, make sure that they can, as they grow, maybe excellent engineers are now being promoted into management positions, or maybe the engineering team has sort of doubled in size or acquired a new company and grown. And we also work a lot with product and design teams as well. So you have product leaders who are setting a strategy and trying to execute on their North Star vision, and they need to make sure that coordination across engineering, product design, data science, research, all the different related teams is sort of happening in a positive, healthy, and high velocity way. So we focus a lot on what might be holding back that kind of strategic execution.
Yeah, I also, one of the things that I like about this new role that we've kind of created for ourselves is we get to work with people up and down the hierarchy. Like sometimes, I'm interacting a ton with senior leaders, the executive team. Other times I'm really on the ground coaching line managers or people who are brand new to management. And that's one of the best things is, all of those different levels are necessary to be thinking about and like nurturing the health of this, product engineering design organization.
Totally. So sometimes, say a VP of engineering or a CTO might bring in Lara to kind of work with the engineering team. And then as she sort of gets the lay of the land, she might notice that there are improvements or things that need to be improved on the product and design side. So she might bring me in or vice versa. So sometimes we work with clients together. Sometimes oftentimes we go in individually. And then what's amazing is both of us kind of have these realms that we're really good at working in. So we can bring in the other person and almost tag team with them to kind of improve an entire organization in one fell swoop.
And when you're working with people, how do they typically describe their goals?
Oh, yeah. So often, so when I get called in, usually it's an executive or a really senior leader, usually within the engineering team, although not always, will be like, I smell something's weird, but I don't know what it is yet.
Right.
Or like they'll start to, we were just talking at an event last night and we started to talk about some of these like organizational health smells. Like there's like a rumor mill and you're not sure why there's a rumor mill, why there's this, misinformation being spread, or people are leaving and you're not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. There's all these kind of different smells. And so usually we get brought in because someone's like, I need some help. Or could you just like come in and see if like you think that this is weird too? And
Right.
often, especially when we're each working with individuals, like when I'm coaching someone, all that stuff is confidential. So I try to, create this safe space for any individual that I'm working with to really be honest, because I don't work at this company. They don't have to worry about what I think of them or their role or, what they're going to say. And usually I can get a little bit more information about the shape of whatever the thing is that's going wrong. And again, that all needs to remain confidential so people can feel safe. But
Sure.
after collecting lots of information, I can usually try to propose workshops, trainings. I offer group coaching called roundtables, or bringing in someone like Deepa who can really talk about tactics and processes and more like infrastructural stuff too.
Yeah, on the product and design side, I think folks reach out because they're like, we're a shipping product, but we think we could be shipping a lot better or a lot faster, or products that have a stronger impact on the business or, better solve customer problems. So it's sort of exactly what Lara was saying. There's like a smell that feels a little off, and they just want some external opinion to come in and check it out. And generally, you come in, you do some exploratory calls and conversations, coaching, auditing maybe how they set their strategy and coordinate across teams. And very quickly, you start diagnosing what's holding back the team or the individuals from kind of being their best selves. And so we start putting in place talks or workshops or roundtables to start chipping away at that and leveling up all the teams.
I love this idea of org smells. Do you have a sort of a top 3 structurally or something like that you see over and over?
Yeah, we were chatting about this last night at this talk that we gave here in New Zealand. And I think, like Lara mentioned, the rumor mill might be churning high. People might be attriting, maybe at a pace that leadership isn't quite comfortable with. Not always a bad sign, but it's definitely something to investigate. Maybe folks on the product and engineering teams are not referring people to work within the organization, bringing in their own network to work there. That always makes me kind of question it. People are really happy and enjoying their jobs and feel like it's a healthy environment. They want to bring in their friends, their network to work there as well. So those are some of the things to keep an eye out for.
Right.
And yeah, another one that I just thought of too is when product either hasn't shipped anything in a while, or the team hasn't shipped anything in a while, or people keep on starting and then throwing out projects. That's usually another good smell.
And do you see these things typically arise? Is it sort of like punctuated equilibrium, like an org reaches a certain size and they go through another wave of this, or when do organizations run into this stuff?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, I think there's like inflection points where this can happen in a more can be more common. And I think Lara mentioned a few of them early on. So maybe your exceptional individual contributors are now being promoted into management positions. So what were some of your great engineers, your great PMs and designers are now themselves running engineering teams, product teams, design teams. So that's an inflection
discipline
point.
Also.
Yeah.
Like management is just not, it doesn't, there's some overlapping skills, but yeah, it's a whole different discipline.
Yeah, and it's a whole different way of coaching them to now be successful in their new roles.
Yeah.
Other inflection points are maybe the company has exponentially grown, doubled in size in a short amount of time, or, 30 new people have joined in 2 months. Sometimes it can be when the competitive landscape changes. Suddenly you didn't have a lot of competition, or you thought you truly understood your market and had found your product market fit. And now things were changing and you start realizing, oh, we need to innovate into a different space. And maybe you haven't flexed that muscle in a while and you need some help to kind of get that going. It could also be acquisitions can be really change-induced times. You've acquired a company, you've been acquired, and maybe you want to bring in some outside help to help guide that transition properly and make sure you're maintaining healthy velocity, shipping great product, and maintaining a healthy culture.
I want also honestly, like, leadership changes are probably the one that I think about the most. Like, a company may not be changing size, they may not have been acquired, their roadmap's been, set in stone for a while, but you get a leadership change that really it just shakes things up in a good or bad way. I think about that all the time. That's often actually the ones that I'm talking about. That's totally my bias.
Yeah, good one.
So what are some of the levers that leaders can pull to better support their orgs? Maybe if you have, sort of a top 5, and then we can dig into them one at a time.
Oh yeah. There's so many. So
Sure.
I'll start talking about one. Clarifying roles and responsibilities tends to be the thing that structurally can create a lot of change throughout an organization. So as an organization kind of starts up, you normally don't have like a career ladder or a skills matrix, or, really well, you often find people who are doing lots and lots of, different things, wearing lots of different hats. And then as you add more people or you grow the company, it's really hard to distinguish between what someone wants to do, what someone should be doing, and what someone is doing but doesn't really want to be doing. Especially if you want to be promoting people and recognizing their own growth, or you want to be giving them more responsibility. Usually clarifying roles and responsibilities with things, again, like a career ladder or a skills matrix, or just, I like to talk a lot about this Venn diagram of, like, if you've got 3 leads on a feature team, a engineering lead, an engineering manager, and a product manager, how can you articulate what those people are each supposed to be responsible for, and where they have overlaps and responsibilities? So if you draw this Venn diagram with these 3 circles, hopefully it can be a tool to help those 3 peer leaders decide who's doing what, who people can go to ask questions of for what kinds of responsibilities, and what stuff is, overlapping, what should be shared responsibilities, and make that, get that documented somewhere so that there can be a shared understanding that can evolve over time.
And what's sort of the happy state here? Is this sort of driving towards kind of discrete ownership, or what does it look like what does clarity look like?
Clarity, I'm gonna put a stake in the ground and say the good stuff happens when there's a shared understanding. It actually, from my point of view, it doesn't even matter who's doing what. You can come up with totally bananas other titles than those 3 standard ones and be like, you know what, but you're responsible for A, I'm responsible for B, and this other person's responsible for C. And, like, as long as there's that genuinely shared understanding, not just with those 3 people or however many people, but with the entire team that needs to work with them and rely on them, that is like the holy grail of clarification of roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, and I think when you've achieved that, what you see is better accountability across teams. You see expectations that are being met and that people really understand, so matched expectations. And in general, you see higher velocity. So you see people producing better, higher quality output in pursuit of whatever the organization's goals are.
I'd love to dig in on that accountability a little bit. I mean, I feel like that can be such a lightning rod for builders, right? For people, right? Whether it's design, whether it's product development, engineering. What's a healthy way to think about accountability in, a non-trivially sized org?
Yeah, I mean, I think almost it's like, what do things look like when there is not accountability? And that's right. Where you can I think if you don't have that clarity that Lara's been talking about, the way that manifests is poor accountability. And that might mean there's sort of inertia, right? Nothing is happening with any sort of urgency within the teams. There might be sort of controlled chaos, like maybe too much is happening, but it actually doesn't have a lot of impact. Or maybe everyone's checked out and feeling sort of ambivalent. And so that's why if you got to sort of check into why that might be happening. 9 times out of 10, the diagnosis that we've come up with when we start experiencing that and seeing that on the teams that we're leading, it's that folks don't understand what they're responsible for, and they want that clarity, right? Lara talks so much about how brains need that clarity so that they can feel comforted and safe. Am I getting that right,
That's
Lara?
right. Yeah, totally. Thanks, Deepa.
And so that clarity is so important because once someone truly understands what is their individual responsibilities in their role as a product manager, a designer, a tech lead, a DevOps engineer, any of those roles, what are their individual responsibilities and what are their shared responsibilities within their team and cross-functionally, they can start delivering on that. And then they're being more accountable. So when they say that they can do something, they're able to do it. They're able to do it in a safe, secure, and easier way. And so then everything just sort of gets better. And that train just feels like it's flying right off the tracks in a good way.
I've been giggling this whole time because I've been thinking about this word accountability, and it can be so meaningless of a word, but we all kind of use it. It's so important to accountability is necessary for us to each, be able to work with other people and be humans to each other. But it's actually, when people ask me about accountability, when a CTO is like, how can I hold people accountable? That is a smell. I mean, I usually ask coaching questions like, can you give me a for instance, or what does accountability mean to you? What are we actually talking about here? Because people don't show up to do a bad job mostly.
Yeah.
Probably don't work with sociopaths.
Amen.
So when you're asking to hold people accountable, what is it that you actually really mean? Are you talking about how do we measure impact? How do we measure success? Are you talking about how to make sure you can penalize someone when they mess up? Are we talking about postmortems? What on earth does it mean? So I'm over here giggling because I don't have a real answer yet. But what Deepa just mentioned is usually what I try to talk about is humans have these 6 core needs at work. One of them is certainty and predictability. One of them is understanding how their work and their job is, contributing to improvement progress, either of the company or the organization as a whole, or of their team or of their own improvement or progress in their careers. People want to understand how they belong to a group. People want to understand where their status is in this group. People want to feel like things are being equal and fair. And so all of these core needs tell me accountability isn't really what we're talking about. We're talking about something else. And everyone kind of has a different reason why they ask this question. So Travis, why did you ask that question?
Well, I think we've all been I've certainly been on engineering teams where the accountability word comes up. Mm-hmm. And what I translate that in my head into is who do I whack?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
It's the headspace that accountability, belongs to.
Yeah.
And so I guess maybe, an interesting question here is what's a better headspace than that? Let's say you're talking to someone who's coming from this, who do I thump because I'm mad, nothing's getting done, headspace. Right. That's a smell. Where do we want them to be coming from?
I want that leader to take responsibility for the fact that their people don't have clarity.
And maybe getting a little curious about why do they feel the need to thwack someone?
Right.
Where is that coming from?
Totally.
Is it really about that person, or is there something else happening, some missed expectation that they have that isn't happening? And then you have to almost go on this fact-finding mission. Lara calls it data gathering to sort of figure out what exactly is happening that's making you, feel like it's accountability that's not being the accountability is not happening. It could be something else, but it's almost onus is on you as a leader to go root that out.
Yeah, and to make sure that you've done due diligence of making sure you've set clear expectations. If someone's not doing their job, it's probably because the leadership didn't actually make sure that there was that shared understanding of who's doing what and what our goals are and how we're measuring it. Absolutely, there will absolutely be times when people don't meet expectations, but you can't thwack them, and hopefully you won't ever, but you can't even have a conversation in which feedback can happen until you clarify those expectations and make sure that there's this shared understanding of what you're expecting of other people.
It almost sounds like you're suggesting, and maybe I'm going too far with this one, but the right answer, if you're in leadership for who's accountable for this, is sort of like me.
It's yourself, yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Totally.
The buck kind of stops with you. It's you and your leadership team working together and constantly. It takes work to create a healthy, clear, shared environment where people want to do their best work. As Lara said, we most likely don't work with sociopaths. Everyone's showing up every day wanting to do their best, but do they have the framework and the guardrails in place to do that best work?
Yeah.
So let's imagine that I am someone who, needs more accountability on the team. and you're helping me reframe that headspace, what are like the top 3 nuts and bolts, let's do this next week things you would recommend?
I think the first thing is I would talk about observations of behaviors and then the impact of those behaviors. And Travis, you and I have talked about this a little bit before. But in terms of like, okay, when we're talking about accountability, what specifically, paint me a picture of what it is that you want to see people doing. Sometimes that means, I'll ask a leader, like what's a behavior that you want to see in terms of accountability? And they'll say, I want this person to email me a report of time spent on the project and how far it's come, or how much more money we've made this week, or whatever it is. And I'm like, cool, ask them to do that. Don't just say like, I need you to be accountable for this. It's like, no, you clearly have a picture in your head of how you want them to behave. And then also I usually ask, what's the impact of them sending you that report? Or, what's the impact of whatever behavior you've just described? And often they'll say something like, oh, that I won't feel like I'm in the dark. And I'm like, right. This is about you and your needs. This isn't about what this other person doing a poor job. And it's not always the same reason, obviously, but usually the impact is also really illustrative of what this leader is going through and what their biggest fear is right now. Because again, it's all about this leader's deal. It's rarely about someone intentionally or just mistakenly doing a bad job.
Right.
Well, another thing that I think that teams and leaders can make sure are put in place is that sometimes what manifests as lack of accountability, like in that example that Lara was sharing, where the leader wasn't getting the transparency that they needed into the day-to-day of a project or status or understanding if a ship date was going to get met. Sometimes that results because of communication breakdowns. And so when people feel like someone's not being accountable, they're not doing what I was expected of them, it could be because they are actually doing that, but there's no paper trail, there's no flow of communication in order to share that information and almost make that information self-serve. So you're not having to ask people for things, but you can go see the state of a project, what phase a product in the development lifecycle is. You know how to maybe go to a particular meeting or pop into a Slack channel in order to give your feedback or about something, or share an insight that you learned on a sales call or something like that. And so something that I think a lot of companies don't do well enough, especially as companies have more and more remote teams and are more distributed in nature, is creating the documents, the meetings, and calling out the milestones that kind of keep the product development train on track. So when people complain to me about accountability, sometimes I feel like what they want happening is actually happening, but they're just not aware of it. And so you need to make sure that you have sort of living product documents, living processes that make it easy to get that information when you need it, in order for you to coordinate, in order for other teams to coordinate. And so that can actually really boost accountability. So Jeff, definitely I work a lot with teams to make sure that they're checking in on what are their product development processes and making sure that that's well documented. Really integral documents like roadmaps are up to date always, and they're living, as in they never go stale, and other people can reliably make plans against that.
Awesome. I think this is a great place to dig in. So living product documents and processes. What does that actually mean? What is the living part?
Oh, this is Deepa's jam.
Yeah, I mean, by living, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to call attention to the fact that your product development processes, your key product documents, like your strategic objectives and your roadmaps, these are documents and processes that need to be tended to. They need to be updated regularly, especially as the organization might grow, might add on more remote team members, so on and so forth. Because if you don't take the time to document your product processes, basically individual teams end up reinventing the wheel, duplicating efforts, or they have unnecessary and wasteful disagreement. And so a lot of time, companies don't spend enough time really explicitly calling out what their product development lifecycle is and where these critical documents that keep that product development train on the tracks live. And so when I talk about product development processes, I'm really talking about critical documents like roadmaps, strategic plans, a whole historical archive of experiments ran, or a way to go see what a feature or a product that was launched, how it performed. Where can I go get in a self-serve manner sort of an assessment of the impact of feature X or product Y. And additionally, you need to think about the meetings that almost anchor the development workflow. as you start off doing some discovery, and then you move into design and research, and then you develop the product, and then go ahead and get ready to test and release it. And then afterwards, once you've released it, how are you cycling back to check in on how it's performing and decide what to do next? There are a few critical meetings that can really keep that sort of flowing smoothly and making sure everyone has access to all the information they need, not just the team building the product, but leadership and stakeholders. And lastly, I like to use milestones to make sure, it's kind of clear. It's sort of the little bit of a shared rallying cry that whenever you hear these milestones announced, you sort of know where the project is in the state that it's in. Okay, look, discovery is complete. Design is complete. We've just started coding, and now we hit code complete, and we've tested it, and it's test complete, and now it's shipped. These are critical milestones that you kind of want to share super broadly within the organization, not just within the product team, but with the marketing team, the sales team, the BD team, so that everyone knows the state of project.
And I feel like there's a lot of confusion in the industry sometimes around what a product roadmap looks like in an agile world.
Oh my gosh, totally.
It creates this fear that we're going to slip back into, the waterfall days of yore. What does that look like?
Yeah. Such a great question. And it's like a hot topic right now, right? I kind of get a little bummed when people talk about roadmaps, but what they're actually talking about are project plans or Gantt charts. They want to know the size and the scope and the due date and who's working on it. That's not really a roadmap. A roadmap comes out of the strategy for your product, for your company, for your feature team. The key inputs into a strategy are obviously some sort of mission and vision. What is that future North Star? And then you break that mission and vision down into strategic objectives and measurable goals. So now you have the inputs into actually creating your roadmap. I like my roadmaps to actually be essentially a queue of problems that you're going to focus on, problem statements. So my roadmaps never have project names or never have, the solution like onboarding V2. Instead, my roadmap is a list of the problem statements that the team thinks is valuable to focus on, and to solve those problems will result in customer impact and positive business impact. So my roadmap might look like improving attrition in the publishing flow, or making sure users are set up for success when starting their new project or something like that. So state them as problems and not try to avoid trying to slide your roadmap into what is actually more of a project plan or a project management document that lists out sort of the scheduling and the resourcing of a project.
RavenDB is a multi-master distributed database with no single point of failure. Multiple nodes can accept both read and write requests to your database cluster, giving your users 24/7 availability. A fully transactional, non-relational database, RavenDB offers ACID throughout the cluster. Secure your organization with backups in real time. Keep everything running with assignment failover. If a node goes down, its ongoing tasks will be redistributed immediately to other nodes. Try it free at ravendb.net.
So you briefly mentioned a few key meetings. This is one of those things that I'm always leery of because I've been in a lot of useless meetings.
Yes.
How do you evaluate what a valuable meeting looks like, and not let that kind of stuff snowball into half of my life is meetings?
Yeah, well, I'll talk a little bit about the meetings that I love to see happen, and then Lara actually has a lot of great tips around how to facilitate really high quality meetings. Because you're right, we're all in meetings all the time. As you grow in responsibility and kind of have bigger and broader leadership roles, you go from being in no meetings to being constantly in meetings. And then where do you actually have time to do work, to do the creative thinking and the creative work of building products and designing products and leading teams? So basically what I like to do is make sure that in the product development workflow, there are a few meetings that happen to make sure everyone is aligned. So at the start of product development, I think kickoffs are really, really valuable to get everyone on the same page. I open them up as broadly as possible to anyone in the organization to come in and share their point of view on a particular customer problem. What have they learned? What do they think are the key motivators and drivers for why customers are having a hard time with XYZ? And then what I like to do is use some meetings as the project moves into the design phase, when the product manager and the designer really feel like they have a strong point of view on what the solution is and have found a good solution that fits the problem. I like product reviews to make sure that key stakeholders and leadership are coming together to look at the problem, look at the solution and make sure it all lines up really well. And another meeting that I love that I actually don't think organizations do enough is once something has shipped, whether it's 2 weeks later, 6 weeks later, even 6 months later, regrouping and having leadership and stakeholders and the team come together to look at how the product is performing out there. Look at the usage data. What anecdotal feedback have we gotten from support? What are people saying about this and how are they actually using it? And look through that qualitative and quantitative usage information to decide what to do next. So those are some of the meetings I like to see. But for how to run good meetings, I think Lara has some really good thoughts there.
Thank you for the nice tip, Deepa. So yeah, I love talking about meetings. I totally feel you. You know, like meetings. If you're in too many, it can feel like, oh, why do I have to have all of these meetings? But the first thing I like to say is, there's that old adage like, this could have been an email. And actually, a bunch of studies have shown that usually it can't be an email. Humans are so bad at understanding context, at understanding tone, at understanding just normal human things that you get from using your mouth words. So I usually recommend to leaders, and specifically, I hear this refrain often from engineers, which I just think is so unfortunate. Like, be better, folks. Understand that no, this couldn't have just been an email, because often important context is going to be lost, or important tone is going to be lost if we just have an email. Okay, so how to make a great meeting. There's a bunch of stuff that's been written out there on how to make a great meeting. I recommend that people who are annoyed by meetings go and read this so they can figure out how to suggest improvements or give feedback on the meetings that they absolutely loathe and despise. But the first thing I recommend is to separate the meeting facilitation and the meeting leading responsibilities, meaning this person who's leading a meeting usually also can't facilitate it. Like, they're using their brain power on making sure that we're accomplishing the goals of the meeting, or they are really heavily bought into whatever the content is of the meeting, which means that they probably can't also spend their brain power making sure that everybody is being treated fairly and has equal access to participate, or is reading the room for confused faces, or making sure that we end on time. So it can be really helpful to distinguish between those two roles and get yourself a meeting facilitator. That way you can actually focus on leading that meeting and leading that group of people. So a facilitator, I usually like to say, should be thinking about, again, fairness. Does everybody have equal access to participate in this? Does everybody have what they need to actually attend this meeting? Is the enough context been shared beforehand? Do we know what the agenda is? Do we know what we're trying to accomplish? Is that person who is facilitating the meeting also deputized with stopping steamrollers from talking? Because that can be a really tough power dynamic if that facilitator isn't actually a strong facilitator of steamrollers. So yeah, that facilitation role is so critical, and one that I think often gets lost, but actually can be the difference between a really powerful meeting in which stuff gets done, things are decided, and people can go back to their days, and meetings that just feel completely useless. The last thing I'll say about this too is try to distinguish between what work can happen asynchronously outside of a meeting and what work can happen synchronously inside of a meeting. Meaning, inside of a meeting, it's really helpful to make decisions, to unblock people, to share, again, that really important context. And you got to think about a meeting as like unlocking people to go back into the next week of work so that they can do a ton of stuff. They can gather feedback. They can gather additional information. They can go and work on whatever it is that you decided on in that meeting, and then regroup again the following week and say, all right, let's make the next round of decisions, and unlock people to go again into that asynchronous way of working again.
Right. And so do you have a sense of what a healthy level for, let's say you're an individual contributor, like what's kind of the portion of your week to carve off for useful meetings?
Don't we all?
Yeah. I don't know if that calculus exists.
It doesn't.
That's a little tricky, especially as more and more companies have distributed teams or fully distributed. I think that the better way of thinking about it is, as an individual contributor, are you getting the information that you need to do your job? And are you able to provide the information that you need in order to do your job and help your team be successful? And if the answer to either of those questions is no, then look at the communication flow. And it could be that what should be written down isn't being written down, like those living documents. It could be that the venues and the forums by which to, as Lara said, use your mouth words and really digest topics in more detail isn't happening. And so start like reverse engineering from there. For example, when we do research sprints, I'm really into continual short research sprints. yes, you can write an awesome research report and post it up on your wiki, and people can really learn from that. But the real actionable insights that come out of user research and other research tactics like surveys and stuff come when you discuss that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a meeting. How can you maybe discuss the results via Basecamp or tools like that? So I would say start diagnosing where it feels like communication is congested or blocked, and then reverse engineer from there whether you're missing certain meetings or certain venues by which folks can share their thoughts synchronously or asynchronously.
The other thing I wanted to add to this too, that kind of comes back to Travis's question, is like a manager should be setting expectations for their individual teammates, what they should be expecting in their given week to actually attend meetings and be invested in meetings, because everybody's going to be so different. We were recently working with an organization that was revamping their recruiting process, and as I was gathering information from engineering managers and from engineers about what their current frustrations were with the existing recruiting process, I found a lot of people were like, it just takes over my week and I don't know how to do work around this. And I'm not even sure, is this the right amount of time I should be spending in interviews or doing phone screens or reviewing homework? And so one of the things that we did was establish, like, if your team is hiring, here's our estimated amount of hours per week you're going to be spending either in interviews or in pre-huddles or in debriefs after the interview or phones or whatever else. And just to set a little bit of more of an expectation that was like, your whole week is going to be dominated by hiring stuff. And that's okay. Like, we have this new expectation. It helps product managers and engineering managers and tech leads estimate work better once you kind of have some of those little expectations. So it really is on a manager to set those expectations for their individual teammates as much as possible.
I was kind of hoping you had a number like 12.8%.
Yeah, it would be. So
but I suppose that's why it's hard.
Yeah, that's why it's hard. I've yet to mention this on this podcast, but there's been a couple of topics that have come up so far that have reminded me of this study about heart surgeons. And so I guess heart surgeons, I don't know, I'm not a surgeon, but I guess heart surgeons actually go and do rotations at different hospitals. I'm not actually sure why. I forget that part of the study. But the whole deal was like, you've got a home-based hospital, and then you also do rotations. Maybe it's like emergency rooms or something else. I can't remember. But the point is, you have a home hospital, and then you go around and do other heart surgeries too. And the study was trying to figure out, do you become more of an expert the more surgeries you do? It was a study about expertise. And they found that, you would assume the more experience you get, the better you become, the higher success rate you have with these surgeries. But actually, they found that although these doctors did get better, they only got better at their home hospitals, meaning they continued to go around and do the surgeries, but statistically, it was with their home team that you actually saw the benefits of their expertise grow over time. So there's something in here. I get that this doesn't exactly relate to meetings, but there's something in here about, like, you've got to be with your home team, and you can only be better with your home team, and like, you've got to meet with these people and understand these people and like hang out with these people and like get to know and share expectations with these people. And there's just so much about this that, like, sure, you can go as an engineer and do work and work siloed on projects or work with new teams, rotate on and off different squads. But actually, what's most critical to your success and your team's success and the project success and the company's success is like developing those relationships with those people around you.
Developing that connective tissue, totally.
Yeah.
Being empowered, yeah.
One of the things I've heard you talk about previously is this idea of leading difficult conversations is a really great tactic. What is a difficult conversation?
I could talk all day about. I feel like our jobs is just a series of difficult conversations. So difficult conversations. When I think about difficult conversations, I think about someone who's in a leadership position, usually, not always, but usually, knows they need to have a talk with somebody else. That could be a performance conversation. That could be, hey, we are organizing layoffs. That could be, we need to completely throw out all of this work that you've been doing for the last 2 years because now we've got a new company direction. Difficulty, comes in all forms. So when I think about this, I often think about clarity of message and how important it is to get that right up front. I think about how you can like develop empathy with this other person. So often when we need to communicate new information that's going to be hard for someone to hear, we know what it feels like in our own bodies and heads, but we can't empathize with this other person. So remembering Everybody else has an amygdala. Everybody has an amygdala. And our amygdalas are responsible for the fight or flight responses. And they're doing is they're taking in information from outside, and they are categorizing it as either threat or reward. And if a threat feels threatening enough, our amygdala will tell our prefrontal cortex, that super logical, super rational, complex problem solving part of our brain, to go on standby, which means all you're left is with like an amygdala driven human in front of you. So as you're getting ready to have that difficult conversation, think about the 6 core needs that humans have at work, that our amygdala is thinking about and is just trying to secure for us. So I talked about these a little bit before, but it's belonging. We need to feel like we belong to this larger group of people. We understand how we relate to them. The image I usually like to show here is an image of a group of ring-tailed lemurs that sleep in super adorable group hug naps for safety and warmth. And so we need to have a sense of belonging with the crew. The next one is equality or fairness. So we all want to believe that, things are fair, people are being treated fairly, people have access to the same things in a fair way. We all know that if humans perceive a lack of fairness, we'll literally take to the streets about it. This is when you see usership decline. Again, riots happen. So equality and fairness. And sense of improvement or progress is really important. We want to feel that like we are growing, or like our company is growing, or our team is making progress towards a deadline, are really important. Shipped date. We all want to have a sense of choice. This is autonomy. We don't want to have too much choice. Like we don't want to most of us don't want to have like a Wild West out there, although some people do thrive in that scenario, but we have to have some balance of like choice in front of us and what we can do every day. Predictability is another big one. We want to feel like it's not just constant waves of change. Again, some people thrive in that, but most of us need a balance of certainty and unpredictability. And then the last one is status. So we really want to feel like we understand our place in the hierarchy, and that we're usually continuing to grow, or at least that doesn't feel threatened. So those, I did them out of order, but the acronym for those is BICEPS, which was licensed as Creative Commons by Paloma Medina. If you're familiar with SCARF models, it's like SCARF, but a little bit better because it's open source and also has the improvement progress one. So difficult conversations, you've got to constantly be on the lookout for potential threats to this person's amygdala. And so you can, take care to make sure that you are helping them understand how this affects their sense of belonging, or sense of certainty, or sense of, equality and fairness, or sense of improvement and progress towards that goal. And that's usually the framing that I like to give to people as they're getting ready, ramping up for that difficult conversation.
So what, do you have any tips for people who have to deliver negative feedback? I mean, I think we've heard sort of like the compliment sandwich. Is that still the state of the art, or are there other things?
It's funny. I was speaking at a conference recently, and they had a little, a prep for speakers that was like a code of conduct prep, but also just like generally a helpful like getting to know you thing before the conference started. And the person who was leading it, she's incredible, and she was like, I want to defend the compliment sandwich, because sometimes, again, amygdalas, we kind of need
Well, dopamine
to get
hit.
that hit of dopamine. Exactly. So I'll take back most of what I said about compliment sandwiches. I don't think that compliment sandwiches are good if you're trying to hide bad feedback. If you're trying to like couch it in other things, that's not good. But she actually called it a compliment fruit tart, which I really liked. But the idea here is that like you shouldn't just be like sandwiching negative feedback in between two compliments in a way to like skirt the issue. I really like to frame feedback in terms of observation, and then impact, and then a request or a question. So the observation, I talked about this a little bit a minute ago, of a behavior is like, something that can be recorded on a video camera. It's the who, what, when, where, why. It should be really obvious, really fact-based, nothing based on your assumptions. The example I usually like to give is someone has been sending me emails that only have 3 to 5 words in the body, and it seems like they're being just angry all the time, and they're being really short with me, and maybe it seems like they're mad at me. The observation I have for them, if I'm delivering feedback to them about this, can't be, it seems like you're mad all the time, or your emails are really short, right? Those are judgments, those are assumptions, those are not observations. An observation is, routinely, on average, your emails contain 3 to 5 words in the body. I have observed this to be true. And then you kind of couple that with the impact of that behavior. And this is kind of where you get to start to insert some of your assumptions or judgments, or just how it makes you feel. So in the case of the email, I would say, Sometimes I wonder if you're mad at me when I receive these emails with 3 to 5 words in the body. Or I could say, often when you send me these emails that have 3 to 5 words in the body, I have to respond and ask more clarifying questions because I don't fully understand what you mean off the bat. And the impact of that is that it actually adds time before I can actually go and do the thing, just adds time to the process overall, which drags things down. So that's the impact. Usually I like to ask, and what's the impact of that? And then what's the impact of that? Anytime I'm coaching someone through creating feedback, because often there is like a nugget that's really deep at the end of this impact, layer cake that's really helpful for this other person to understand, like, what's the impact of their behavior. And then you cap it all off with a request for them to change their behavior or a question. Requests are handy when you have a very obvious thing that they can do differently, but honestly, it doesn't help people grow and learn usually. So I like to encourage people to ask a question instead, and not like a loaded question like, why do you seem so mad all the time? Like, that's not a question that's going to be helpful, but a question like, can you help me understand why you choose to write emails with 3 to 5 words in the body? Or what were you hoping to accomplish with this email? Or what were you hoping I would glean from this email? Coaching questions like that start with what, that are open-ended, tend to help this other person start to think about their behavior and the impact that it's having, and then start to form their own solution to this problem because you've equipped them with knowing what the impact is. You don't have to spell it out for them how to correct it. Like, they can come to their own conclusions about it. And usually people's amygdalas are so much more open and receptive to this form of feedback because, again, it doesn't feel threatening. You're not making passing judgment. You're not making assumptions. All you're doing is saying, here are the facts on the ground of the observation and the impact. What can we do about this together? It's again, so handy when you need to have those difficult conversations with feedback.
I was just going to say that this feedback equation, like when Lara first explained it to me, it's so simple, it's so succinct, and it's so powerful. Because 99% of leading is giving critical feedback, having difficult conversations, right? Generally, you're stoked when you get to celebrate things and things are going great. But oftentimes, you do have to have those difficult conversations. And so often, managers and leaders aren't in any way given the skills to do that properly, and so then they can shirk it. It can make them nervous. It can make them almost dread their job and their role. But if they're just given a little bit of tactical advice on how to do it in such a clear and valuable way, it can be so freeing. You can start embracing having those conversations and then reaping the benefit of having those difficult conversations. Things get better. Things get shared more openly. You get the feelings out.
Yeah. I have inherited so many engineers in the course of my management career that just never got any feedback. And so I would inherit them and I would often hear from their previous manager, like, oh, they're terrible at this thing. Oh, they're not really a team player. Oh, whatever. And I usually ask, like, cool, when was the last time you gave them this feedback? And they're like, yeah, I didn't. And so then, whenever I start to observe the same behavior and I share that feedback, usually what happens is these people are like, what? Really?
Yeah.
Like, I had no idea that people were perceiving me this way or that this was the impact of that behavior. And I'm like, right, like, these poor individuals were never equipped with the feedback. Like, feedback is a gift you're giving to someone else. It doesn't, I get it. It's scary. It feels hard. It feels weird to deliver feedback, but genuinely, it would make everybody's lives so much easier if we were better at routinely giving constructive feedback.
I feel like there can be this tricky balance between the idea of, delivering hard news and keeping your team motivated. That's sort of one of the things that I think I, as a manager, certainly think about. What do you think the right way to do that is?
Oh, man, right. It's so hard. Deepa and I are actually working on a book right now about all of the stuff that we're talking about on this podcast. And just yesterday, I sent to our editor and to Deepa the chapter on communication. And communication often for us as leaders means doing that tricky balance, like creating clarity, also sharing honest, hard updates, and also
Yeah.
still trying to motivate people. So usually when I've seen organizations do this really well, it's because everybody has this shared understanding of where we're trying to go as an organization. Like, what is our North Star? What is the thing that we're aiming for? Which means that when you hear hard news, everybody around the company is able to understand how this impacts our North Star, how this impacts them, and whether or not it makes sense towards this North Star. When I see organizations fall apart at the seams, it's because a change has happened and it doesn't make sense in the context of that North Star. Like, where were we trying to go on this mission? why on earth is this new thing? Why were we acquired? Why do we have layoffs? Why do, whatever the thing is, it's because people can't reason about whatever this thing is. So usually when I think about big, hard, scary, the CEO is changing over, or again, acquiring happens, or, whatever it is, I think about how can I help people see how this relates to our organization's North Star, where we're trying to go, and how
Because then
that
it
hasn't
makes that
changed.
feedback go from being such a personal thing to being part of a broader context. So it's a little more palatable. It's a little more
Yeah.
understanding why it's even being called out. It's not because John, have done something poorly. It's like, okay, John, this thing that you're doing has this halo effect that's like maybe holding us back. And so we want to help you get into a better place for the benefit of you, the team, and the broader mission.
It sounds like context is a pretty key
So
thing to
important.
bring into communication. So how can you give some examples of what that looks like done well?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, Lara and I learned this together when we were leading teams at Kickstarter. One of the things that we did to give context and to give context often and in a unified and consistent manner was that we would share communication updates together. And I mean that literally, like we would stand up there together to co lead all hands meetings with the entire product design, data, and engineering teams. We would co author emails together, like signed by both of us to announce strategic changes or staffing changes or anything like that. So, one of the ways to give context is to communicate often, to communicate consistently. You want all of your leadership to be sort of, banging on the same drum together and making sure you're kind of working in lockstep. That's how that adage, a rising tide lifts all boats. It's because that's sort of happening together. So we did a lot of things where we would communicate together and avoid giving disjointed communications or communicating in a siloed manner. And so we do that by leading cross organizational meetings or writing cross organizational emails or opening cross organizational office hours. And so when our team saw us kind of coordinating together and getting that shared context, so it wasn't just me giving an update to the product and design team, Lara giving an update to the engineering team, but us giving an update together, tying it all together, what it means cross-functionally in the broader mission and how that translates down to specific functional teams, that was really, really helpful. So it finally meant that people started understanding the why behind the things that we were asking for. Hey, look, we got to pull the ship date up on this critical project. Or, hey, we decided to defer this project that everyone was really excited about because of XYZ. When they got that context, it made those kinds of changes less scary, less concerning, and more like, oh, okay, I get it. Great. Thanks for sharing with me the path to that decision. So many times leaders don't share the reasoning behind their decisions, the path that took them there, the other options that they maybe discarded along the way to making that decision. You got to share that backstory, share that journey to the decision, because that buy-in then comes when people understand the thought process that brought you there.
Because otherwise it's just lopsided information, like just your trusted advisors will understand how you got there. So that actually the other thing that we did was whenever there was something that only affected one subset of teams, Deepa and I would still share talking points with each other and with the leaders in our organizations. That way everybody still had the context. If I had talking points for my engineering managers about an engineering management thing, I would still share it with Deepa and I would still share it with the product managers because it was so critical for us all to have that shared
Totally. And
understanding.
because we had these honest, candid conversations, our team started having more honest and candid conversations with each other and explaining the path
Yeah.
to their decisions. So, I mean, literally, I started seeing in our product and design reviews more explanation around discarded design choices and the way that someone sort of landed upon the solution that they were presenting. And so, because we were really good about sharing the pathway, the narrative, the history to a decision, the team started mimicking that behavior, which was really good and helped improve accountability and trust.
Awesome. Well, look, is there any sort of additional advice for managers who are looking for ways to be better leaders or grow their teams do you think is important to call out?
Hmm. Get yourself a crew of people who are there to support you. People who have more experience than you do, have less experience than you do, because those fresh eyes are really helpful. Lean on people who are in other industries. One of my best mentors is a CFO. It was really handy to have her in my corner. Find people who will sponsor you, who will put your name in the ring for things. Find yourself a coach. I mean, this is going to sound self-serving because I'm a coach, but like find yourself a coach, because getting that other person to just be a champion for you, that you can unload on and share your truth with, and have someone else just kind of reflect back for you and help you introspect and find your own path to things, can be so valuable. I like to call it my manager Voltron, because it's like all of these different individual managers are coming together to make up this one amazing unicorn
So let
manager.
me ask one follow-on to that. How, I know this is going to sound kind of ridiculous. How do you ask for that? Like, what's the structure? Is it, hey, let's just have a meeting every couple weeks? If you find a good mentor, what's a good cadence for getting input from strong people around you?
Yeah. So I usually advise against walking into someone's office and saying, "Hello, fine person, could you please be a mentor or a sponsor for me?" Because that's not actionable. That's not all that helpful. So Yvette Pasqua, who's the CTO at Meetup, she told me about one of the things that she does, and actually I realized that she did this to me, which is how we got first connected, is she'll come up with a topic that's genuinely of interest to her. At the time, she was reorganizing her infrastructure organization, and so she reached out to me. I can't remember, email or Twitter or something, to be like, "Hey, I'm planning on reorging my infra team. I know that you run an infra team. Would you be game for talking about it over coffee?" I mean, she knew me enough to know that that was something I would probably be interested in talking about and sharing my experience in. People love talking about themselves mostly. So that's her way of beginning to develop those relationships. She'll find something that we have in common, that she genuinely has a challenge she's trying to overcome, or something that she wants to find out more about. She'll ask people to coffee about that. And that's how she begins these relationships. Because over time, you will hopefully lean on each other. I usually recommend not being a jerk, being someone who other people will want to vouch for, who people will want to help you, because often in those relationships, people are putting their reputation on the line for you, whether or not it's something huge like trying to hire you for a job. Even if it's something like introducing you to their network, they want to know that you're not going to be a total jerk about it. So yeah, doing good work, genuinely being helpful to them too. Even if I can't actually help in people's day to day, I try to offer to give them space to vent, or be a rubber duck, help them workshop an idea or think through a new solution. Even those tiny things can be of value to them too. I recommend, Twitter is kind of a tire fire these days, but that has historically been where I've gotten to know people. Going to local meetups, there's so many groups in so many areas. There's some thriving different CTO clubs in New York that I've met some folks at. Just kind of like developing those connections and trying to find that place of genuinely you could use a help on a very specific thing, and ask someone else for help on that very specific thing is usually the
And
way to
does it
start
have
those
to be like
connections.
co-located? Can you kind of create your manager Voltron remotely? Like maybe reach out to people who
Oh yeah.
you know through Twitter or know through your extended network, to be like, let's chat regularly. Let's create that forum where we can learn and share from each other.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Most of my manager Voltron is over video. Probably only a couple of them do I see in person regularly. And here's a secret: it stresses me out to have set up routine like
Me
coffees with
too.
people, because I'm like, it just takes so much time out of I have to commute to wherever that thing is, and I just like being at home. But but video or phone calls, honestly, can be so easy for me, especially when it feels like I can reach out to someone to talk about something that feels pressing for me, or that they can reach out when they want to talk about something that feels pressing for them, rather than having, there's very few. Deep and I have a biweekly one-on-one phone call
Yeah,
that
but
goes
we also
great.
feel like we
That
can
is
cancel it
so
whenever we
rare for
don't
me.
need it. There's no
Exactly.
expectation there, and I think that's so life-saving.
It's critical, because I think I would
Yeah.
just be stressed out and annoyed by it if especially with the multitude of people who are asking me to go to coffee or to have routine chats. I'm like, no, just tell me when you want some
Yeah.
specific help and I will be there.
Awesome. Well, Deepa and Lara, thanks for joining us today. This is Travis Kimmel for Software Engineering Radio, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Bye.
DigitalOcean is the easiest cloud platform to deploy, manage, and scale applications of any size, removing infrastructure friction and providing predictability so developers and their teams can deploy faster and focus on building software that customers love. With thousands of in-depth tutorials and an active community, we provide the support you need. DigitalOcean stands out of the crowd due to its simplicity and high performance with no billing surprises. Try DigitalOcean for free by getting a $100 infrastructure credit at do.co/SERadio. Thanks for listening to SE Radio, an educational program brought to you by IEEE Software Magazine. For more about the podcast, including other episodes, visit our website at se-radio.net. To provide feedback, you can comment on each episode on the website or reach us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or through our Slack channel at seradio.slack.com. You can also email us at team@se-radio.net. This and all other episodes of SE Radio is licensed under Creative Commons License 2.5. Thanks for listening.